This car will beat a brand new Porsche 911 through the quarter mile. Not a vintage Porsche, a current one. 6 figures, launch control, turbochargers, all of it. And this car still gets there first. It's a 1969 Chevrolet Corvette. Specifically, it's a Corvette with 3 letters stamped on its data plate that Chevrolet actively did not want you to notice. L88. Chevrolet lied about its horsepower, deleted the radio, deleted the heater, told its own dealers to talk buyers out of ordering it. And still, 216 people found a way to buy one anyway. Here's why Chevrolet tried so hard to hide its own car. The engine that lied on paper. Officially, the L88 made 430 horsepower. That number was fiction, and Chevrolet knew it the day they printed it. Real output, confirmed by modern dyno testing and the National Corvette Museum's own research, 500 to 580 horsepower. Some tuned examples cleared 600. A 12.5 to 1 compression ratio. Later 12.0 to 1 with open-chamber aluminum heads. That demanded fuel most gas stations in 1969 simply didn't sell. There was a physical warning label mounted behind the shifter, telling the driver the engine required 103 research octane or it would destroy itself. Forged pistons, forged connecting rods. A solid lifter camshaft aggressive enough to give the engine a rough, uneven idle that made it genuinely miserable in stop-and-go traffic. This was not an engine designed to be pleasant. It was designed to survive abuse a normal street engine was never meant to handle. Why the fake horsepower number? Insurance companies were already circling high-performance engines by the late 60s, and federal regulators were starting to take notice too. An honest horsepower figure would have invited exactly the kind of scrutiny Chevrolet needed to avoid to keep building this thing at all. But underrating the horsepower wasn't even the strangest thing Chevrolet did to this car. Chevrolet actively tried to stop you from buying it. If you wanted an L88, Chevrolet built you an obstacle course on purpose. No radio, no heater, no defroster, deliberately deleted to shed weight and discourage street use. No air conditioning, ever. No power steering. The mandatory equipment list bundled in heavy-duty brakes with special proportioning valves and 4-piston calipers. The close-ratio Rock Crusher M22 4-speed. Stiffer F41 suspension. A G81 positraction rear end. A transistorized ignition. Effectively doubled the price of a standard Corvette by the time you signed the paperwork. And dealership staff were informally instructed to steer interested buyers away from it entirely, toward the L71 or L89 instead. Engines that were nearly as fast and infinitely easier to actually live with day to day. The strategy worked exactly as designed. 20, built in 1967, 80 in 1968, 116 in 1969, 216 total across 3 years, out of tens of thousands of Corvettes Chevrolet built in that same window. The 1967 car, just 20 units, is widely considered the single most desirable Corvette of the entire C2 generation. So why would a company build a car, then spend that much effort making sure almost nobody bought it? That answer has nothing to do with sales at all. It's about a rulebook Chevrolet needed to satisfy on the other side of the Atlantic. The race rule that made the whole car necessary. Zora Arkus Duntov, the engineer most responsible for turning the Corvette into a genuine performance car, wanted it racing seriously at Daytona, Sebring, and eventually Le Mans. But international sanctioning bodies required production-class race cars to be genuinely available to real customers first. No paper-only race specials. No cars that existed purely on an entry form. Corvette's existing big block options, the L36, the L68, even the excellent aluminum-headed L71, weren't tough enough for sustained endurance racing at the level Duntov wanted to compete. So he needed an engine durable enough to survive 24 hours flat out. And legally, it had to be sold through a dealership to qualify for homologation. The L88 wasn't built to sell. It was built to exist on paper long enough to make the Corvette legal to race. That's the entire reason every deleted comfort feature and doubled price tag makes sense. Chevrolet wasn't trying to sell you a fast car. They were trying to satisfy a rule book, and you happen to be collateral in that process. And once that engine actually reached a real racetrack, what it did there is a chapter of this story that most Corvette owners today have never even heard. What the L88 actually did at Daytona and Sebring. L88-powered Corvettes didn't just qualify for competition. They went out and genuinely competed against factory-backed Ferraris and Porsches on the same tracks, in the same races, for real results. At the 1969 Daytona 24 Hours, L88 Corvettes ran in the GT class against European exotics that cost multiples of the Corvette's price. They weren't there for show. Owen Corning-sponsored and privateer L88 teams were regularly finishing on the podium in SCCA production racing throughout the late 60s and into the early 70s, going wheel-to-wheel with cars whose manufacturers had entire racing divisions dedicated to nothing else. This is the part of the L88 story that separates it completely from the rest of the muscle car conversation. A Hemi Cuda never had to survive 24 consecutive hours of racing at full throttle. A Boss 429 Mustang was built to dominate a quarter mile, not hold together through the night at Sebring, while running down a factory Porsche 911. The L88 had to do both, brutal in a straight line, and durable enough to survive a full day of abuse that would destroy almost anything else built in Detroit that decade. That dual identity is exactly why, more than 50 years later, this car can still walk up to a brand new Porsche and not back down. Which brings us to the number that started this whole video. The numbers that still beat a Porsche. 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. Quarter mile around, 12.2. In genuine race trim, properly geared, documented runs in the high 11-second range. On bias ply tires. With a manual clutch, a human being had to time perfectly. No traction control, no launch control, no computer managing a single part of that launch. Independent modern testing puts a current Porsche 911 Carrera, a car costing well over $100,000, at 11.7 seconds in the quarter mile, 3.5 seconds to 60. The 911 wins to 60, through the quarter mile, where the race actually ends. The gap all but disappears. Even against Chevrolet's own modern flagship, the current Corvette Z06, with a flat plane crank V8, an 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, and sticky modern tires, the L88 isn't embarrassed. The Z06 is quicker, decisively. But the fact that a carbureted 1969 car with a warning label taped behind the shifter is even mentioned in the same sentence as a car that expensive and that modern tells you everything about how far ahead of its time the L88's engineering actually was. 50-plus years of tire technology, all-wheel drive, launch control, and turbocharging. And this car still gets to the stripe at almost exactly the same time as cars built to embarrass it. That's genuinely one of the more remarkable numbers in this whole story. But it's not even the reason serious collectors argue about what to even call this car. Is it a muscle car or a sports car? If stories like this, the ones a manufacturer actively tried to bury, are exactly why you're on this channel, now's a good time to hit subscribe, because this one only gets stranger from here. The traditional muscle car formula is simple. Big American V8, mid-size body, affordable price. The Corvette never fit that mold. It was always a two-seat sports car, priced differently from a GTO or a Roadrunner. But mechanically, the L88 is pure muscle car DNA, a deliberately underrated horsepower figure, exactly like Pontiac and Plymouth were doing with their own engines the same year. A stripped-down, comfort-be-damned approach to weight, exactly like the Roadrunner and the AMCSC Rambler we've covered on this channel. The only real difference is that this one also had to survive 24 hours at Sebring, not just a quarter-mile pass on a Friday night. The L88 doesn't care which shelf you file it on. It performs like both simultaneously. But the regulation that finally ended it wasn't a rule book this time. It was Washington. Why it disappeared after just 3 years. 1969 was the L88's last year. And the reason is almost identical to what killed the entire muscle car era a few years later. Tightening federal emission standards made that 12.5-to-1 compression ratio impossible to keep building. It simply couldn't run on the cleaner fuel regulations we're about to require. Chevrolet's planned follow-up, the LS7, was supposed to push even further, as much as 460 cubic inches on paper, a genuinely staggering theoretical output for a production Corvette. Rising insurance costs and tightening regulation meant it never actually reached Corvette buyers the way it was originally planned. A handful of prototype LS7 engines exist today, effectively orphaned by the same regulatory shift that killed the L88. The L88 existed in a narrow, specific window, a moment when racing rules demanded a street-legal race engine, before emissions rules made that kind of engine illegal to build at all. That window closed, and it never opened again quite the same way, not for Corvette, and not for almost anything else built in Detroit. What 216 survivors are worth today. Most L88s were bought specifically to be raced hard, meaning genuine survivors are exceptionally rare today. And the auction results back that up completely. A 1969 L88 coupe with 15,480 original miles, restored to concours condition with full documentation, sold for $450,000. Another, bought new and drag raced for 5 years, with a documented 10.82 second quarter mile before being retired and restored, sold at RM auctions for $401,500. A fully documented, numbers-matching example crossed the block at Mecum Monterey for $530,000, backed by its original build sheet, window sticker, and period drag strip time slips. The rarest of the 3 model years, the 2019 67 cars, almost never come to market at all. When one does surface, serious collectors treat it the way art buyers treat a genuinely irreplaceable painting. It isn't just a fast Corvette. It's a physical artifact from the exact 3-year window, when a manufacturer was legally required to build a race car and sell it to the public to compete internationally. A set of circumstances that will never align the same way again. Documentation is everything in this market, because so many L88s were modified or raced hard, and because engine swap clones, a Corvette with a later non-original L88 spec engine dropped in to fake the configuration, are a real and persistent concern for buyers. A verified, numbers-matching L88 commands a serious premium over one with an incomplete paper trail. Serious buyers will pay specifically for the original tank sticker, the factory invoice, and NCRS, or Bloomington Gold certification, proving the engine in the car today is the engine that left the factory. With only 216 genuine examples anywhere in the world, finding one to buy is considerably harder than affording one, and that math isn't likely to improve for buyers waiting on the sidelines. 216 cars, an engine Chevrolet lied about on the spec sheet and actively tried to keep out of customers' hands. a racing pedigree that put it on the same track as factory Ferraris and Porsches, and a quarter-mile time that still matches a brand-new Porsche more than 50 years later. Now I want to hear from you. Did you know about the L88 before today? And do you think a classic muscle car can genuinely still hang with a modern supercar? Drop it in the comments. We read every one. If this surprised you, hit like and subscribe for American automotive history most channels never bother to tell. See you next time.